What happens when the owner of an 8-location buffet chain goes undercover and sees a dishwasher collapse, only to watch the supervisor ignore it and keep piling food on trays? Russell Lane hadn't been in the kitchen trenches in over 5 years. He built his buffet chain from a single mom and pop diner into 8 busy locations across 3 cities. But with growth came distance. Between meetings with suppliers, expansion plans, and investor calls, Russell had become a suit behind a desk. He heard whispers store 7 in Denton had a high turnover rate, some odd customer complaints, and a few managers constantly requesting overtime pay despite low sales numbers. But nothing solid, just fog, so Russell decided to cut through it. He told his assistant he'd be unreachable for 3 days and took a rental car down to Denton. No driver, no entourage, just him, a fake name on the schedule Rick, and a month of beard growth to help him blend in. He even wore thick prescription glasses and dyed his hair darker. He'd never met anyone at this location in person. Most of the Denton team had been hired by a district manager, and the current supervisor, a guy named Dean, had started only 6 months ago. Store 7 was the only one that hadn't had a visit from Russell in over a year. He walked into the back entrance in the early morning wearing steel-toed shoes and a borrowed uniform. The kitchen air was thick with heat and steam. A teenage girl looked up from chopping onions. "You the new guy?" she asked. "Yeah, Rick, they said I'm starting dishwasher today," she nodded. "You'll need gloves. They're in the drawer next to the broken toaster. I'm Piper." "Thanks, Piper." She gave him a tight smile and went back to work. She looked tired but focused. There were dark circles under her eyes. He was quickly shown the ropes by a cook named Lewis, who seemed to be doing twice the amount of work he should have been. The dishwashing station was a mess. Dishes stacked up to his chest, water pooling on the floor, and a leaky sprayer that soaked his shirt every 10 minutes. He didn't complain. He wanted to see how things ran. By noon, the buffet line was packed. People shuffled down the trays, scooping mashed potatoes, meatloaf, fried chicken. It was busy and the kitchen was loud. A guy named Darren, another dishwasher, moved beside him. Russell noticed Darren's hands trembling as he loaded trays. "How long you been here?" Russell asked, keeping his voice low. 3 weeks, Darren said. "Feels like 3 years. Rough, Darren nodded. "We're down 2 people. One walked out last week." "Never replaced him." "Why not?" "Dean says budget's tight, but we still do the same dishes." Russell clenched his jaw. He felt a familiar heat rise in his chest. He wasn't proud of this. He had let this go unseen for too long. By the time 2 p.m. hit, Darren looked pale. Sweat dripped from his forehead. He hunched over the sink, breathing heavy. "You okay?" Russell asked, stepping closer. Darren didn't answer. He swayed. Then his knees buckled. "Whoa, hey." Russell caught him as he went down, water splashing up from the floor. "Darren," Piper shouted from across the kitchen, rushing over. A few cooks turned. One even stopped mid-chop. Supervisor Dean walked past the open kitchen door, saw Darren crumpled on the wet floor, and didn't even slow down. "Hey," Russell barked. "He just fainted." "We need help here," Dean glanced back. "Piper, take care of it. Rick, refill tray 8, we're low on mac and cheese." Russell stared at him, stunned. "Are you serious? We've got a full dining room. You want customers walking out." Russell gritted his teeth, kneeling beside Darren. He was breathing but barely responsive. "I'm calling an ambulance," Piper said, already pulling out her phone. Dean threw his hands up. "Overkill. He probably skipped breakfast again. Just get him some water." Lewis stepped up beside Russell. "He's burning up." Dean waved them off and went right back to the buffet line, where he started refilling trays himself. Like nothing had happened, Russell stood up slowly, his fists clenched. His heart was pounding. He looked around. Employees were frozen in place, unsure what to do. He saw it in their faces, the fear, the exhaustion, the quiet anger. Something in him snapped, but not yet. He helped carry Darren to the breakroom couch with Lewis and Piper. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later. Darren was taken out on a stretcher. Russell stood in the corner, soaked, jaw tight. Dean didn't look twice, but Russell had seen enough, and tomorrow Dean would see who Rick really was. Russell arrived early the next morning, well before the kitchen lights flicked on. The air outside was still cool, the back lot empty except for an old sedan he didn't recognize. He leaned against the wall near the delivery door, watching the sky shift from slate to pale blue. Lewis pulled up 20 minutes later, parking his dented pickup in the furthest corner. He got out, shoulders already slumped, and spotted Russell. "You're early," Lewis said, unlocking the back door. "Couldn't sleep," Russell replied. "You hear anything about Darren? He's still in the hospital." Piper said they're running tests. Could have been heat exhaustion or something worse. His mom showed up last night, looked like she hadn't stopped crying in hours. Russell followed him inside, the fluorescent lights buzzing on overhead. "Was Dean here when the ambulance left?" Lewis nodded. "Didn't even say bye. Just told Piper to clock out if she was going to be overly emotional. She stayed anyway. Closed the kitchen herself." Russell's jaw tightened. He said nothing and grabbed an apron from the hook. By 8, the crew had trickled in. Piper looked more alert than yesterday, but her eyes were raw around the edges. A new face joined them, too, a thin young man named Caleb who said he'd been hired 2 days ago and hadn't received any training. Dean hadn't scheduled anyone to show him the ropes. Caleb was assigned to the fryer. Russell watched him fumble with the basket and nearly drop a load of frozen wings into oil that was still heating. No one had told him to wait for temp. Lewis rushed over and stopped him just in time. Piper mumbled something under her breath and went back to chopping vegetables. The silence in the room was heavier than the steam. Dean walked in at 9:15. He wore a Bluetooth headset and a clean polo shirt, sipping from a branded tumbler. Without making eye contact with anyone, he pulled a clipboard from the office and walked straight past the line. "Caleb, you're behind," he barked. "These trays don't fill themselves." I didn't know the oil was ready. No one." Dean didn't let him finish. "Figure it out or get out of the way." Russell stepped forward. "He's new. Maybe give him 5 minutes to learn before throwing him into a hazard." Dean looked up, annoyed. "Who asked you?" "No one. I just thought maybe someone not doing anything could help him out." Dean narrowed his eyes. "If you've got a problem, take it up with the district manager. Otherwise, stick to dishes." Russell nodded slowly. "Sure." By lunch, the line was backed up. A tour group had arrived early and the kitchen was stretched thin again. Caleb burned his hand trying to switch pans without gloves. Piper took over his station without being asked. Dean was nowhere to be found. A customer walked into the kitchen holding a cracked plate. "This was in my food," she said, holding up a shard of porcelain. Lewis gently took the plate from her. "We'll get you a fresh meal right away. I'm really sorry about that." She nodded and left. Russell scanned the line. The plates had been stacked too high near the warmer. One must have cracked from the pressure and slipped into the serving tray. He turned, looking for Dean. Still gone. An hour later, he found him in the office with his feet up on the desk, scrolling through his phone. The clipboard sat untouched beside him. Russell stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "You're understaffed. Your new guy nearly burned himself. Someone fainted yesterday and a customer almost swallowed glass. You going to do anything?" Dean didn't look up. "You're overreacting. People pass out. Accidents happen. If you don't like it, there's the exit." Russell took a step closer. "You don't train anyone, you don't cover shifts, you walk away during rush." Dean finally looked up. "You're just a dishwasher, know your place." Russell's voice dropped. "No. I'm the owner." Dean froze. The silence in the room stretched. "I beg your pardon." Russell pulled the glasses from his face and dropped them on the desk. He reached into his back pocket and laid his ID down beside them. "I built this company from the ground up. I've worked every position in this building, and I've never seen someone treat a team this badly." Dean stood up slowly, his face flushing. "Look, I didn't know, that's the problem," Russell cut in. "You only care when you think someone matters." Dean took a half step back. "I can explain." "Don't. I saw everything. You ignored a medical emergency. You put undertrained employees on hot equipment. You walked out during peak hours. And you've created a culture where people are afraid to speak up." Dean's voice wavered. I've been under pressure, so is everyone else, Russell snapped. Except they still show up and work. You're done here. Clean out your things. Dean opened his mouth again, but Russell didn't wait. He turned and walked out, calling over his shoulder. Lewis, get the keys from him. I want him off the property in 10 minutes. Lewis didn't hesitate. The kitchen had gone quiet again. People had heard. Piper stood near the prep table, her hands still, her eyes locked on Russell. He nodded at her. Come with me. They stepped outside, the heat already rising in the alley behind the store. I owe you an apology, Russell said. This shouldn't have gone on this long. Piper looked down at her shoes. It's not your fault, we just figured no one cared. I do, and I will from now on. I need someone to help get this place back on track. You know this kitchen better than I do. I want you to be the interim shift lead until we hire someone permanent. Her eyes widened. Me. You've earned it. You held this place together while the person in charge sat in an air-conditioned office. You didn't ask for recognition. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need, she hesitated. I don't have experience managing. You have experience surviving in chaos. That counts for something. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do my best. I'll be here all week. We're rebuilding this place together. He walked back inside and gathered the team. No one's getting fired or moved unless they deserve it, but things are going to change starting now. The room stood still. Then one by one, heads nodded. They were tired, but they weren't broken, not anymore. By noon the next day, the rhythm in the kitchen had shifted but not smoothed. Dean was gone, but the gaps he left behind were obvious. With no assistant manager and still missing 2 line cooks, everyone was stretched. Piper, now acting as shift lead, had been juggling station coverage, clock adjustments, and supplier calls since 7 that morning. She hadn't touched a cutting board all day. Russell, still dressed in the same uniform he'd worn undercover, remained on the floor not as an observer but as part of the crew. He hadn't left the dish station once, silently absorbing the cracks in the system Dean had neglected. They were undeniable. The fryer timer went off with a sharp buzz. Caleb, still nursing the redness on his hand from the day before, hesitated. Russell stepped over, quickly slipping on gloves and handling the basket. Go grab cold water for your hand, he told him, not turning his head. You've got 10 minutes. Come back and help Piper with line setup. Caleb didn't argue. The kid was barely 18 and it was clear he'd never worked a kitchen before. But he listened. That mattered. Lewis slid a tray of cornbread onto the warmer, his shirt sticking to his back. We're out of the cranberry sauce. Supplier didn't drop it off. Piper appeared at his side, flipping through a clipboard. They dropped at store 5 by mistake. I called ahead. We're not getting it today. Lewis wiped his forehead with a towel. So we just say sorry to every guest who walks up to the turkey station? No, Russell said. We get creative. He walked to dry storage, scanning the shelves. Is that orange marmalade? Piper followed him in. Yeah, we use it for breakfast biscuits. Mix it with the brown sugar and a little vinegar. Use it as a glaze. Tell the servers it's a seasonal twist. She blinked. You just made that up. Yes, but it'll work. Back on the line, the buffet trays were filling up slowly but steadily. Guests were patient. Some had already noticed the new faces in the kitchen, and a few even complimented the service to the front cashier, a sharp-eyed woman named Trudy. Russell hadn't spoken to her yet. She'd been quiet the past 2 days, but he'd noticed her watching everything. She tracked people. She remembered faces, and she didn't miss much. After the lunch push, with the dining room finally thinning, Russell headed to the break room. Piper was at the table, eating a cold sandwich with one hand while texting with the other. How's it really going? He asked, sitting across from her. She looked up, brushing hair behind her ear. Honestly, it's chaos, but at least now people aren't afraid to talk. I saw you redirect that delivery this morning. Good call, she shrugged. I've been watching things fall apart for months. Didn't think I'd be the one holding the duct tape. You're not alone, she looked at him carefully. You really built this place, started with a diner. Took me 6 years to open the second location. I used to do every job here. I've cleaned grease traps at 2 in the morning and peeled potatoes until my hands blistered. Piper nodded slowly. Then why'd you stop coming around? He met her eyes. I got too comfortable with spreadsheets. Let middle management tell me things were fine. Nothing's been fine here in a long time, he nodded. I see that now. Before she could respond, Trudy appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, you got a second? Russell stood. Yeah, come in. She glanced at Piper, then back to him. Just you? Piper gave a small nod and stepped out. Russell gestured to the seat. What's on your mind? Trudy didn't sit. She crossed her arms. I've worked here 3 years. I've seen a lot. But the last 6 months, things went dark. How so? Dean hired a guy last month, Doug. He was supposed to be night crew, but he barely showed up. When he did, he'd clock in, disappear, then come back hours later acting like nothing happened. Sometimes he'd bring in people through the back door, not staff, just people. Russell's expression tightened. You report it 3 times. Dean said I was exaggerating, told me to mind my own business. Is he still on the schedule? Tonight, 8 to close. Russell nodded once. Thanks for telling me. As she turned to leave, she paused. I didn't say anything before because I didn't think anyone would listen. You did the right thing. She left without another word. At 7:30 that evening, Russell sat in the office reviewing shift logs. Doug's clock-ins were erratic, sometimes missing altogether. There were nights where overtime was logged without any closing checklist completed. At 7:58, Doug walked in the back door. He wore a hoodie over his uniform and carried a duffel bag. He didn't notice Russell sitting in the dim office and made a beeline for the employee lockers. Russell waited until he heard the metallic clunk of the locker door before stepping out. Doug, the man, turned, startled. He was in his early 30s, tall, wiry, with an impatient posture. Yeah, leave the bag where it is and step outside. Doug frowned. Who are you? Owner. Let's go, Doug scoffed. Since when does the owner play security? Russell didn't flinch. Since I found out you've been using this place to clock in and vanish and bringing guests through the kitchen, you're done here. Doug took a step forward, jaw tightening. You got no proof. I have witnesses, logs, and camera footage from the office. Want to keep pushing this for a moment? Doug looked ready to start something, then he seemed to reconsider. Whatever. This place is a dump anyway. Take your bag. Don't come back. Doug yanked the locker shut, slung the bag over his shoulder, and disappeared out the back without another word. Russell locked the door behind him. As he turned, he found Piper standing near the dish pit, holding a clipboard. That who I think it was? Not anymore, she nodded once. Good. Later that night, when the doors finally closed, the remaining crew gathered near the front. Trudy counted the till. Caleb mopped the entryway. Lewis leaned against the wall, exhausted but steady. Russell stood in front of them. I'm not going to pretend everything's fixed. It's not. We're still short-staffed and we've got repairs that should have been handled months ago, but we're not ignoring problems anymore, and I'm not disappearing again. Lewis looked up. What happens next? Tomorrow, a regional operations lead is coming down. We're reviewing every station, every shift. We'll be hiring with your input, and everyone who's been carrying the weight is getting paid for it retroactive. Piper blinked. You mean that? I do. And I'm not leaving until this place runs like it should have all along. No one clapped. No one needed to. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was steady, like something solid being rebuilt from the foundation, and this time Russell wasn't above it. He was standing right in it. The following week started early, heavy with the kind of work that didn't show up on spreadsheets. Russell had cleared his calendar completely. He didn't send anyone else in to fix things. He stayed, sleeves rolled, apron on, same as the rest. What had been chaos a few days ago was now strained coordination. Not smooth, but honest. A regional operations lead named Carla arrived Monday morning. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, with a quiet way of taking things in before speaking. Russell didn't introduce her as an outsider. He brought her in during the morning prep meeting and simply said, "She's here to listen, not judge," which she did. For 2 straight days, Carla rotated through every station, shadowing without interfering. She watched Piper organize a delivery drop while answering a question from Caleb about portion sizes. She stood beside Trudy at the register while she handled a guest complaint about a table mix-up without breaking pace. She even joined Lewis in the dry storage at one point, asking about labeling systems and how often stock went missing. At the end of day 2, Russell sat with her in the back lot, the sun low behind the dumpsters. "Thoughts?" he asked. Carla didn't hesitate. "They're running with half a team and twice the stress. If this crew walks out, you'll lose the only thing holding this location together." "How many new hires do we need?" "At minimum. 1 night lead, 2 line cooks, and a dedicated cleaner." "You fill those, they can breathe again." "Start recruiting tomorrow," Russell said, "and I want you to stay on another week, help train whoever comes in." Carla nodded. "They deserve better than a quick fix." "So do you," he replied. The next morning, Russell brought the team together before opening. No clipboard, no schedule in hand, just his voice steady. "I should have seen this sooner. There's no excuse for how long this location was left to run itself into the ground, but I'm not here to patch holes and walk away. We're rebuilding properly." He looked around the room. No one avoided his eyes. "We've posted for new hires. Carla will oversee training. In the meantime, hours will be adjusted so no one's pulling doubles unless they volunteer. And starting today, everyone here gets a raise." "Retroactive to the day Dean was removed," Piper blinked. "You already got approval for that?" "I didn't need approval. I own the company." A few people exchanged glances. Not disbelief, just the quiet realization that maybe, finally, someone meant what they said. Caleb raised his hand, hesitant. "What about the stuff Dean changed, like break schedules and tip share?" "Reverted. Fully. And if anyone wants to report something that happened, anything, we've brought in an HR rep from corporate, confidential, in person." Trudy stepped forward, her posture straighter than usual. "You're staying through all this, as long as it takes." She gave a small nod, then turned back toward the register. That was all the confirmation Russell needed. By the end of the week, the difference wasn't dramatic, but it was real. New applicants filtered in slowly. Carla ran interviews on site, only hiring those who showed they understood kitchens weren't about clocking in, they were about carrying weight alongside others. One applicant was dismissed on the spot after making a snide remark about Piper's age, questioning whether she had the authority to train him. Carla didn't raise her voice. She simply stood, handed him back his application, and told him they wouldn't be moving forward. He didn't argue. 3 new hires joined by Friday. A soft-spoken cook named Jordan with 10 years of experience, a part-time janitor named Ray who'd previously worked night shifts at a nearby hospital, and a young woman named Elena who'd studied culinary arts but was struggling to find her first job. Piper immediately offered to train her personally. No one complained about it. The kitchen started to breathe again. Not wide, full breaths, but the kind that didn't feel like drowning. On Saturday, after the dinner rush, Russell gathered everyone in the back, not for a meeting but for a meal. He'd ordered in from one of the smaller locations barbecue ribs, cornbread, sweet tea, and set up folding tables in the break room. People didn't rush to grab plates. They stood talking, decompressing, for the first time in what felt like months. Lewis sat down beside Caleb, showing him how to adjust the call sheet for supply ordering. Piper leaned against the fridge, laughing with Ray about a customer who'd asked if the mashed potatoes came from the potato machine. Even Trudy allowed herself to sit for a few minutes, her plate balanced carefully in her lap. Russell moved between them, not as the boss, but as someone who'd finally remembered what he built this place for. He sat down next to Elena, who'd been quiet most the evening. "You settling in okay?" he asked. She nodded, chewing slowly. "It's not like school, but it feels good." "Like I'm part of something?" "You are." She looked over at Piper. "She doesn't act like she's above anyone, she just works." "That's why I asked her to lead." Elena hesitated. "I've worked places where people like me don't move up. They say they promote based on merit, but really, it's about who you know or who looks the part." Russell's voice stayed calm. That won't happen here again, not under my watch. She looked at him, uncertain at first, then gave a quiet nod. After the meal, Russell stayed behind to help clean. He didn't rush anyone out. He didn't give a speech. He just wiped down tables and stacked empty trays like everyone else. Later that night, long after the last staff member left, he sat alone at the front booth near the window. The dining room was dark, the parking lot nearly empty. He watched the streetlight flicker over the sidewalk. He thought about the moment Darren collapsed. How no one moved. How silence had become the language of this place, not anymore. He pulled out his phone and opened the company-wide scheduling app. Under Store 7, he added a new internal note. Weekly check-ins required owner visits scheduled once per month, minimum. Staff feedback to be logged and reviewed by senior leadership within 72 hours. No exceptions. Then he closed the app and slid the phone into his pocket. This wasn't about overseeing from a distance anymore. It was about showing up, staying present, and never letting silence take root again. The next morning, Piper unlocked the door at opening. She didn't find Russell in the office. He was already at the sink, rinsing out coffee pots, radio playing low in the background. She didn't say anything. She just stepped beside him, picked up a towel, and started drying. And for the first time in a long time, the place felt like it belonged to the people in it.